Austin, Texas, December 6, 1991. The night air carried a cool, dry chill as darkness settled over West Anderson Lane. The streets were quiet, typical for a Friday evening in a city still growing, but with neighborhoods that felt close-knit. Small strip malls lined the road, neon signs glowing faintly, and in one corner sat a cheerful frozen yogurt shop called I Can't Believe It's Yogurt. Inside, two teenage employees, 17-year-old Eliza Thomas and 17-year-old Jennifer Harbison, were finishing their shift. They were tidying counters, restocking napkins, and cleaning tables, the familiar tasks of closing time. Alongside them were Sarah Harbison, 15, Jennifer's younger sister, and Amy Ayers, 13, a friend of the Harbisons. The two younger girls had come for company, enjoying a quiet evening in the shop while the older teens finished their duties. It was meant to be a normal night, a routine end to the week. Before diving in, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest cold case stories. The girls worked quietly under the hum of fluorescent lights. Outside, the parking lot was mostly empty, with the occasional car passing under the soft glow of streetlights. The surrounding strip mall shops were dark, a video rental store, a bakery, a small fitness center, leaving the yogurt shop as the only active spot in the immediate area. The clock neared 11:30 p.m., and the girls were finishing the last of their closing tasks. The lights inside glowed warmly, in contrast to the darkened streets outside. The familiar sounds of the shop, the buzz of refrigerators, the hum of the machines, the soft scraping of chairs filled the room. By midnight, the shop was empty of customers, the girls completing their final cleanup. Then, in the space of an hour, everything changed. At 11:47 p.m., a passing patrol car reported smoke rising from the strip mall. Firefighters were dispatched immediately. When they arrived, flames were licking at the back of the yogurt shop. The fire was deliberate, controlled, not accidental. It was quickly evident that this was no ordinary fire. As crews pushed through the thick smoke, they discovered the unimaginable. 4 girls, bound, gagged, and shot in the head, lying inside the shop. The fire had been set to partially destroy evidence, but it could not conceal the horror. The victims were soon identified: Eliza Thomas, 17, an employee, quiet and dependable; Jennifer Harbison, 17, an employee, outgoing and athletic; Sarah Harbison, 15, Jennifer's younger sister visiting the shop; Amy Ayers, 13, friend of the Harbisons also visiting. The city of Austin, known for its safety and friendly neighborhoods, was suddenly plunged into grief and disbelief. Parents worried for their own children. Neighbors and friends were shocked that something so violent could happen in their community. Police sealed the area immediately, while forensic teams combed through the burned shop for evidence. The cash register had been emptied, initially suggesting a robbery, but the brutality of the bindings, the execution-style shootings, and the deliberate fire pointed to something far more calculated. There was even evidence of sexual assault. The investigation began under immense pressure. News of the tragedy spread quickly through the city. By morning, vigils were being held, candles flickered along the sidewalks, flowers appeared near the storefront, and the community mourned collectively. Austin would never forget that night. 4 young lives, each full of promise, were stolen in a single, incomprehensible act of violence. And for the detectives who arrived on scene, the questions were immediate and haunting. Who could commit such a crime? How could this happen in a city where everyone thought their children were safe? As the city awoke the next morning, investigators stepped into a scene of devastation, determined to piece together the events of the previous night. Every detail, every trace of evidence would be critical, and the search for answers had only just begun. A pursuit that would stretch across years, testing the limits of forensics, patience, and hope. Dawn broke over West Anderson Lane, casting a pale light on the strip mall that had become the epicenter of a tragedy no one in Austin could comprehend. The storefront of I Can't Believe It's Yogurt remained sealed under bright yellow police tape. a grim barrier between the chaos inside and the curious, grief-stricken onlookers outside. Firefighters, crime scene technicians, detectives, and evidence specialists moved through the scene methodically, each acutely aware of the weight of what they were about to document. For the city, a routine fire call had transformed into a nightmare. 4 teenage girls found murdered in the place that had moments before been a cheerful weekend hangout. The fire itself had been deliberate. Investigators quickly determined that accelerants had been used to ensure the flames consumed as much evidence as possible. Firefighters and investigators described the scene as devastating. Walls were blackened, ceilings collapsed, water from the fire hoses pooled on the floor, and much of the shop's interior furnishings had been burned or warped. Inside, 4 young lives had been violently taken. The 2 employees, Eliza and Jennifer, were fulfilling their closing duties. Sarah and Amy were visiting the shop. All 4 were bound, gagged, and shot in the head, with their bodies partially set on fire in a calculated attempt to destroy evidence. Crime scene investigators moved slowly, documenting every detail they could salvage. Shell casings were recovered near a back exit, partially obscured by water from the firefighting effort. Ligatures used to restrain the girls were preserved where possible. Despite the chaos caused by fire and water, forensic specialists began collecting fingerprints, hairs, and other trace materials that might provide clues to the perpetrator. Every fragment of evidence was handled with extreme care, as years of cold case investigations would later confirm that these early collections were crucial to eventual breakthroughs. Witnesses were interviewed in the hours following the fire. Several recalled seeing 2 men inside the shop during the final minutes before closing. These men were described as sitting quietly, not interacting with the girls or ordering items, but their presence became a key focus for detectives. The fact that the shop's back door was found unlocked from the inside added to the complexity of the timeline. Investigators tried to reconstruct the final hour of the girls' lives, piecing together fragments of observation from neighbors, passers-by, and anyone in the immediate vicinity. From the very beginning, 2 distinct investigative threads emerged. One examined the possibility of a robbery gone wrong. The cash register had been emptied, and initial assumptions pointed to theft as the motive. The second, darker thread focused on the evidence of sexual assault, execution-style shootings, and the deliberate arson meant to obscure the crime. These overlapping factors made the investigation unusually challenging. Detectives had to consider multiple scenarios while simultaneously processing the devastating reality that 4 children had been murdered in one small shop. Over the ensuing months, the APD and Texas law enforcement agencies pursued numerous leads. Early tips ranged from suspicious acquaintances to distant family members, and in some cases, individuals seeking notoriety came forward with false confessions. Police interviewed dozens of potential witnesses and canvassed neighboring businesses, searching for anyone who might have seen unusual activity in the hours leading up to the murders. Each lead had to be cross-referenced, corroborated, and tested against the physical evidence, a painstaking and often frustrating process. In the early 2000s, 2 young men, Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen, were arrested in connection to the crime. Their confessions initially appeared to offer resolution, but questions about the validity of their statements soon emerged. Allegations of coercion and inconsistencies in their accounts led to increasing scrutiny of the investigation methods. When DNA testing became more advanced, it became clear that neither man could be linked to the biological material collected at the scene, and their convictions were eventually overturned. This development highlighted both the fragility and importance of early forensic work and underscored the challenges inherent in a crime scene so badly damaged by fire and water. Complicating the case further, physical evidence had suffered extensive degradation. Fire had destroyed surfaces, melted plastics, and warped metals. Water had washed away potential trace materials, and the lack of surveillance cameras meant there was no video record of the events. Investigators faced the daunting task of reconstructing the crime using fragments, shell casings, trace DNA, eyewitness statements, and items partially destroyed by the flames. Each of these fragments became a vital piece of a puzzle that would remain incomplete for decades. Despite these obstacles, the families of the victims remained deeply involved, advocating for renewed attention to the case and keeping public interest alive. Vigils were held, memorials erected, and community members pressed for answers from law enforcement. The grieving parents of Eliza, Jennifer, Sarah, and Amy demanded justice, their persistence serving as a constant reminder to investigators that the case could not be forgotten. As the investigation entered the 2010s, advances in DNA technology provided renewed hope. Analysts were able to extract a male DNA profile from evidence collected at the scene, a profile that did not match any convicted individual. This discovery opened a new line of inquiry and reignited the efforts of the APD Cold Case Unit. Ballistics databases, forensic genealogy, and interstate criminal records became crucial tools as investigators sought to narrow the list of potential suspects. Throughout all this, the city of Austin remained on edge. The tragedy had shattered the sense of security in the community, and the question lingered: how could such a calculated, brutal crime occur in a place where neighbors had once felt safe? The answers remained elusive, yet the investigators' work never stopped. Each scrap of evidence, each DNA sample, each witness statement represented a thread that could one day lead to resolution. Even as decades passed, the memory of the victims fueled the search for truth. Investigators continued to examine old leads, review forensic material, and apply new technologies, hoping that the fragments preserved from that night would finally point them toward the person responsible. For the families, the city, and the detectives, the hope persisted that justice, long delayed, could still be achieved. 2 men had been seen in the shop that night a few minutes before closing, but their identities remained unknown. DNA collected at the scene provided a faint, elusive trace of the perpetrator, yet it led investigators only a step closer, never to the full answer. The questions loomed larger with each passing year. Who could commit such a calculated, brutal crime? How had the perpetrator left without leaving a trace, disappearing as completely as the hope of immediate justice? These unanswered questions set the stage for the ongoing investigation, a case that would stretch across decades, intertwining the persistence of law enforcement, the grief of families, and the patience of a community seeking answers. Every new lead, every technological advance, brought a renewed chance that the story of that night, of the 4 lives taken in an instant, could finally be told in full. The search for truth would continue, driven by the hope that justice, no matter how long delayed, was still within reach. The investigation into the yogurt shop murders stretched over decades, winding through leads, dead ends, and evolving forensic techniques. Even years later, the case remained a puzzle with missing pieces, a chilling reminder of how one night could irreversibly alter lives and a community. From the earliest moments, detectives focused on the 2 men reportedly seen in the shop shortly before closing. Witness descriptions were brief and imprecise, fleeting images of figures moving in the dim light, faces mostly obscured. Their identities remained unknown, and their fleeting presence would haunt investigators for decades. Were they casual customers, acquaintances, or strangers passing through the neighborhood? Their role, if any, was still a question that lingered in every investigation note. Initial theories considered robbery as a motive, as the cash register had been emptied. Yet the severity and methodical nature of the murders suggested something far more deliberate. The girls had been bound with precision, shot at close range, and the fire had been set strategically to destroy evidence. Investigators noted that the crime reflected a level of planning inconsistent with a spontaneous theft, raising questions about whether the perpetrator had studied the shop and its routines beforehand. Another line of inquiry explored the possibility of sexual predation or violent intent beyond robbery. Fire and water had compromised much of the physical evidence, but trace materials, hair, skin cells, and partial fingerprints were meticulously collected and stored. Analysts at the APD Cold Case Unit would later revisit these samples with modern DNA technology, confirming the survival of genetic material that could link the perpetrator to the scene. In the early 2000s, two men, Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen, were arrested and convicted based on statements obtained during interrogations. At first, these confessions appeared to promise closure. However, inconsistencies in their accounts, coupled with concerns over coercion, cast doubt on their reliability. Later, DNA testing definitively excluded both men, and their convictions were overturned. The case had once again underscored the difficulty of achieving justice in a crime where evidence had been deliberately destroyed. With the rise of advanced DNA analysis in the 2010s, investigators extracted a male profile from the preserved forensic material. While the identity attached to the DNA remained unknown, it offered a tangible clue, a trace of the individual responsible, waiting for technology and persistence to reveal its source. Investigators began using statewide criminal databases, genealogical tools, and cross-referencing ballistics and trace evidence, hoping to narrow the search. Each advancement provided a renewed opportunity, a step closer to solving what had become one of Austin's most infamous cold cases. The community's memory of that night remained vivid. Families held vigils, placed memorials, and pushed for updates from law enforcement. Local media continued to report on anniversaries, keeping public attention focused on the unresolved case. Their advocacy ensured that the investigation remained active and that the victims' stories were never forgotten. Multiple suspects were examined over the years based on past criminal histories, connections to the area, or circumstantial links. Yet, despite thorough investigation, none could be conclusively tied to the crime. The charred and waterlogged scene, the lack of surveillance footage, and the passage of time meant that investigators were often left with fragments, shell casings, trace DNA, and fleeting witness recollections, rather than a complete picture. Analysts studying the case suggested that the perpetrator was likely someone experienced in controlling victims, given the precise bindings and execution-style killings. Others posited that the offender may have been transient, a stranger passing through Austin, explaining why no immediate connections were apparent. While these assessments helped profile the suspect, they could not provide definitive answers, leaving the case suspended between what was known and what remained hidden. For the families, every unanswered question carried a heavy weight. How could 4 young lives be taken so deliberately? And how could the person responsible disappear without a trace? Could overlooked clues or minor details hold the key? Every year without resolution only deepened the uncertainty and grief, transforming mourning into decades of quiet frustration and persistent hope. Even today, the investigation continues. Analysts compare DNA samples to new databases, revisit old leads, and reassess every tip, no matter how minor. Modern forensic tools provide opportunities that were unimaginable in 1991, and each advancement brings renewed hope that the mystery may finally be solved. As you reflect on these events, consider the questions that continue to haunt the city. Who could commit such a calculated crime and leave no trace for decades? What detail might have been missed in the initial investigation that could finally unlock the answers? These are not just questions for investigators, but for anyone who contemplates the enduring mystery of that night. The tragedy remains a stark reminder of the fragility of safety and the importance of perseverance. Every scrap of evidence, every technological advance, and every memory preserved by the families contributes to the ongoing pursuit of justice. Though decades have passed, the story is far from over, and the search for truth continues. For years, the trail of the yogurt shop murders seemed almost impossibly cold. Investigators faced obstacle after obstacle. The crime scene had been deliberately destroyed by fire and partially compromised by water. Witness recollections were fleeting and inconsistent. Physical evidence had been scattered, charred, or contaminated. Despite tireless work by the Austin Police Department and later by specialized cold case units, every lead seemed to vanish into the shadows, leaving a trail of unanswered questions and frustrated detectives. Initial investigative efforts in the early 1990s included neighborhood canvasses, door-to-door inquiries, and widespread media alerts. Police meticulously documented every observation, photograph, and item recovered, preserving what little evidence remained. They tracked known offenders in Austin and surrounding areas, yet without conclusive evidence, suspects could not be charged. The absence of surveillance footage or electronic tracking made reconstructing the events of that night painstaking. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, two men, Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen, were arrested in connection with the murders. Initially, their statements offered a glimmer of hope. However, inconsistencies, possible coercion, and lack of supporting evidence ultimately led to their convictions being overturned. DNA testing definitively excluded both men from the biological material recovered at the scene. These failures underscored the fragility of early investigative conclusions and emphasized the critical role of accurate forensic analysis in cold cases. Despite these setbacks, the case was far from abandoned. Advances in forensic science allowed investigators to revisit preserved evidence with methods unimaginable in 1991. Small fragments of DNA, carefully collected from charred walls, shell casings, and personal items, became pivotal. In the 2010s, analysts successfully extracted a male DNA profile, representing a direct link to the unknown perpetrator. Though the identity attached to this profile remained unknown, it offered a tangible clue, a thread that could be pursued using modern technology. The extraction of DNA prompted renewed investigative energy. Detectives reanalyzed old fingerprints, fibers, and hair samples, while employing genealogical databases and statewide criminal record comparisons. Cold case units followed every lead, no matter how minor, cross-checking the genetic profile against potential familial connections. The painstaking work of re-examining decades-old evidence illustrated how advancements in technology could breathe new life into seemingly unsolvable cases. At the same time, investigators compared the crime to other violent incidents in the region. Behavioral analysis suggested the perpetrator may have been experienced in controlling victims, given the methodical bindings and execution-style shootings. Others proposed the offender might have been transient, passing through Austin, explaining the lack of immediate leads. These hypotheses guided the investigation, but without definitive matches, the perpetrator remained elusive. The families of the victims remained a driving force behind continued attention to the case. They participated in interviews, memorials, and vigils, maintaining public awareness and ensuring the investigation remained active. Their advocacy highlighted the importance of community involvement in keeping cold cases alive, and served as a constant reminder to investigators that justice had yet to be achieved. Even with modern technology and renewed investigative vigor, the case still presented frustrating dead ends. Every piece of evidence, from charred shell casings to minute DNA traces, had to be meticulously examined, preserved, and compared. Investigators understood that one overlooked detail or a fresh tip could finally illuminate the identity of the perpetrator. For the broader Austin community, the tragedy left an enduring mark. The murders reshaped perceptions of safety and heightened awareness about young people working in public spaces. Annual vigils and memorials honored the victims and reinforced the ongoing importance of vigilance and memory. Even today, the case demonstrates the evolving power of forensic science. What once seemed irretrievably lost, DNA, fingerprints, and trace evidence, could now be scrutinized with advanced tools. Each breakthrough, however small, carries the potential to solve a case that has haunted Austin for decades. As you consider the events of that night, the questions remain haunting. Could modern forensic science finally reveal the identity of the perpetrator? Might a small, overlooked clue unlock answers decades later? These questions underscore both the mystery and the hope that justice, though long delayed, may still be within reach. Decades have passed since the tragic night at the Austin yogurt shop, yet the lives of the 4 teenage victims remain vivid in the minds of their families, the community, and the investigators who have tirelessly pursued justice. Each anniversary of the murders brings a renewed sense of grief, a reminder that life was abruptly cut short for these young women whose futures were full of potential. The tragedy continues to resonate not only because of the brutality of the crime, but also because of the unresolved questions that linger to this day, underscoring the profound impact of violent crime on a city and its residents. For the families, each year is a marker of time that offers no real closure. Parents, siblings, and extended family members carry the weight of unanswered questions. Who committed these murders? How could someone execute such a calculated act and then vanish without a trace? Their lives have been forever changed, but so too has their determination. Far from allowing despair to take hold, they became the driving force behind ongoing efforts to keep the case alive in public memory. Through interviews, memorials, anniversary vigils, and advocacy campaigns, they ensured the victims' stories remained present in the community consciousness, a persistent reminder to law enforcement and the public that justice must not be forgotten. The tragedy also left an indelible imprint on Austin itself. It reshaped public perceptions of safety, particularly for young people working late hours in businesses throughout the city. Parents became more vigilant, communities more aware, and local authorities more attentive to preventive measures and support systems for youth. Beyond these immediate impacts, the case served as a catalyst for law enforcement to recognize the importance of meticulous evidence collection and the long-term value of preserving materials for future forensic advancements. Advances in forensic science have provided a renewed sense of hope. The DNA profile extracted from evidence preserved for decades, including charred personal items, shell casings, and hair, remains one of the most significant breakthroughs in the investigation. Though the individual connected to the DNA has not yet been identified, investigators can now approach the case with tools that were unimaginable in 1991. Genealogical research, statewide database cross-referencing, and reanalysis of trace evidence have allowed detectives to explore new avenues that could finally lead to resolution. These methods demonstrate that even decades-old cases can yield progress when approached with modern technology and unwavering diligence. In addition to scientific advancements, human persistence has remained a critical factor in the investigation. Cold case units, forensic analysts, and dedicated detectives have continually revisited every clue, from minute traces of DNA to eyewitness recollections. They painstakingly compare each lead against the accumulated records, understanding that one overlooked detail could provide the breakthrough needed to identify the perpetrator. The painstaking work of preserving evidence, maintaining chain of custody records, and reevaluating past investigative decisions illustrates the rigor required in cold case work, a rigor that the Austin Police Department and supporting forensic teams have upheld for decades. The role of the community cannot be understated. Residents, educators, and local media have contributed to keeping the case in the public eye, participating in memorial events and revisiting the narrative of that night in commemorative reports. Public attention, advocacy, and pressure have ensured that the case did not fade into obscurity, demonstrating the power of collective memory in the pursuit of justice. Families and community members alike have repeatedly reminded investigators in the city that the story of these victims must continue to be told, and that accountability must not be delayed indefinitely. For the investigators, the combination of human and technological persistence offers both hope and frustration. Each potential lead is weighed carefully. Every new tip or development is scrutinized against what is already known. Some leads have ended in disappointment, while others, such as the extraction of the male DNA profile, have reignited optimism. The case illustrates the delicate balance of perseverance and patience required in solving crimes that are decades old. Investigators understand that even a single overlooked witness, a faint fingerprint, or a previously disregarded scrap of evidence could provide the missing piece of the puzzle. The psychological impact of this case on Austin and the broader community is also profound. Parents and young workers reflect on the risks of late-night employment, while educators and local organizations use the case to emphasize safety awareness. Media coverage has highlighted not only the details of the crime, but also the systemic challenges of cold case investigations. including the limitations of early forensic methods, the importance of preserving evidence, and the dedication required of modern law enforcement. By keeping these discussions alive, the city honors the memory of the victims while fostering vigilance and empathy in the wider population. Even in the absence of complete answers, the story of the yogurt shop murders offers lessons about resilience and human determination. Families continue to pursue justice, investigators continue to analyze and reanalyze evidence, and community members continue to hold the memory of the victims close. Each anniversary of the crime becomes both a remembrance and a recommitment to ensuring that the story does not fade, that the lives lost are acknowledged, and that accountability is eventually realized. It is this persistence that defines the enduring legacy of the case. The tragedy is a reminder that justice is not always immediate, that time does not erase memory, and that human effort, combined with technological progress, can eventually illuminate even the darkest mysteries. The investigation continues today. With DNA and forensic comparisons still underway, tips being re-evaluated, and leads being followed up across Texas and beyond. The possibility remains that someone, somewhere, holds knowledge that could finally solve the case, bring closure to the families, and restore a measure of justice. As viewers reflect on these events, it becomes clear that cold cases are not simply unresolved crimes. They are stories of human endurance, resilience, and hope. They are stories of families who refuse to give up, of communities that demand accountability, and of investigators who combine science, persistence, and empathy to pursue the truth. The Austin yogurt shop murders exemplify these qualities, reminding us all that even when decades pass, the search for justice remains vital and alive. And so, as this chapter draws to a pause, not a conclusion, we are left with both the weight of loss and the spark of hope. Even after all these years, someone knows what happened that night. And perhaps one day they will come forward. The pursuit of truth continues, unwavering and persistent, until justice is finally realized. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the search for justice and the untold stories behind each case. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow more revealed crime stories, and we'll see you in the next one.